In the book of Proverbs, we have been studying the promises of God for months and months and months. We've made it to the book of Proverbs, and I picked a promise in the book of Proverbs. And the promise is this: the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and fools despise the Lord's wisdom and instruction. You've got a right hand and you've got a left hand, one that wants to follow the Lord, fear the Lord, gain knowledge of the Lord, and put it to use and be wise. You've got the other guy on the other side who says, I don't want anything this Lord of yours has to say. They reject wisdom. They not only reject it, but they hate it. They despise the wisdom that comes from God. And so the promise that I built off of this statement, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge for some who would choose that, while fools will despise wisdom and instruction, the promise is there will be consequences for either one of those actions. For either one of those decisions, there will be consequences. Positive consequences, negative consequences. King Solomon writes a lot in the book of Proverbs, certainly in the first 6 or 7 chapters, about sexual immorality, about a seductress, and it doesn't only have to be a woman. Obviously, as we know, men have problems with this also. As we've seen in the life of Solomon, not hard to see that men have sexual problems also. But Solomon, as a man, writes as if the sexual problem is a woman, a seductress, a wayward wife, he calls this woman in the Scriptures, and he warns his son about her. Now, tonight's story is a positive story. Tonight's story is the story of Joseph. I started telling you last time Joseph's story, who he was, before we get to the seductress, Potiphar's wife, that tries to seduce Joseph and have him lay with her. We had to lay the groundwork of who is this Joseph, and if he's a Jew, why is he in Egypt? So we talked about a bit of the Joseph story from Genesis chapter 37. If you want to turn back to that chapter, we didn't quite finish it, and then we'll move on to 39, and we'll see Potiphar's wife come on to Joseph, try to seduce Joseph, and Joseph's response. Solomon failed the seduction of women test, failed it miserably over and over and over. Not Joseph. 2 men, we'll talk about more of that in a minute, but Genesis 37 verse 1, just to get the story rolling, it says, Jacob lived in the land where his father had sojourned, in the land of Canaan. These are the records of the generations of Jacob. Last time I showed you this chart of Jacob's family tree. Joseph is the 11th son of Jacob. Just quickly through the tree, Jacob and his wife Leah had certain children: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, the first 4 sons of Jacob, these 4. Rachel gets jealous and offers her maid, Jacob, go into my maid and have children with my maid Bilhah. And the Lord opens Bilhah's womb, and she has Dan and Naphtali. The tribes of Israel are being built, Jacob's 12 sons. There's something in here I want to add, I want to tell you tonight. That's why I'm showing you this again. Leah, not to be outdone, sends her own maid forward. And from Leah's maid Zilpah, then Jacob has more sons, Gad, and the other one is Asher. And now Leah continues having babies. After her maid had a couple, Leah will give birth to other children, Issachar and Zebulun. And then after all this time goes by, we're not talking about a lot of time, 6, 7, 8 years, all these boys are born. After that, Rachel, the Lord finally opens Rachel's womb, and with Rachel, his beloved wife, the wife he loved, Jacob has 2 sons, Joseph and Benjamin. Now, I say all that again because if you go into the Bible and you look for the 12 sons of Jacob, like in Genesis chapter 49, you will see all these names represented. But if you go into the Bible and you look for a list of the tribes of Israel, you're not going to see this exact list. Somebody tell me why that is. What happens to these 12 sons? What are the differences? What are the changes we need to make to this family tree here that make it accurate that these are the 12 tribes of Israel. It's not the same list. What happens to the list? One of these names is excluded from being a tribe of Israel because this particular son did not get a portion. He didn't get a land inheritance for his tribe. As a matter of fact, what he would get is certain cities in each of the other tribes, the surrounding farmlands around the cities, and this was which son? It was Levi, the priests. The priests didn't have their own city. The priests are their own territory. The tribe of Levi, if you go and look for who are the 12 tribes of Israel, you won't find the name Levi in the list. What is the other change? So now we're down to 11 sons. What's the other change that gets us back up to 12? What happens with another one of these names of these boys? Joseph what? Joseph's two sons. You won't find the name Joseph listed in the tribes of Israel. If I put up that map that I always put up here with the color-coded tribes, Zebulun and Naphtali and Asher and Gad and all that, the color coding, you'll never see the name Levi represented, and you'll never see the name Joseph represented. But that's not because Joseph was excluded. That's because Joseph was given the double honor of a firstborn son. He was elevated to Reuben's position and given double honor. So Joseph had two boys. What were their names? Ephraim, number 1, Manasseh, number 2. Ephraim and Manasseh were Joseph's sons. So when you look at the map now and you see the name Ephraim and you see the name Manasseh right in the middle of the territories of Israel, you recognize those are Joseph's people. Joseph's name gets wiped off the list. Levi doesn't get included in the list because he's the priestly family. Ephraim gets included in the list and Manasseh. So you go from 12 tribes to 11 tribes, and then you go down to 10 tribes when you take Joseph's name out. You go back up to 12 when you add his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. That's the way the list looks. I tell you that because I don't want you to be confused when you read the Bible and you say, who is this Ephraim? Is that one of Jacob's sons? No, it's not. It's one of Jacob's grandsons. Who's this Manasseh? Is that one of Jacob's sons? Surely he must be Jacob's son because he's named with the 12 tribes of Israel. No, he's not. He's one of Jacob's grandsons. He's Joseph's kid. So to Reuben, one more statement. To the firstborn son went a double inheritance, and Joseph inherits that. That's why Joseph gets 2 tribes. Instead of Joseph 1 and Joseph 2, the Lord named him after his 2 sons. So Joseph got the double inheritance from his oldest brother Reuben, but Reuben, as the firstborn, also should have been the ruler of the family. He should have been the head of the family. He should have had superiority, preeminence as the leader, the authority in the family. But Reuben lost not only the double portion, he also lost authority in the family. And who did God shift the authority to? Who would rule the 12 tribes of Israel? Which one of these sons? Joseph got the double portion. Judah took over the rulership. From Judah will go the kings. The scepter will not depart from Judah. It should have belonged to Reuben. I could tell you the story, but I don't have time. But Reuben lost this birthright. And so the double portion that Reuben should have gotten went to his younger brother Joseph. The authority that Reuben had as a firstborn went to his brother Judah. You talk about another character in the Bible who forfeited a lot that was his, like Solomon. Reuben is another name that forfeited tremendous amounts that should have been his by birthright. So, the story tonight, Levi's not counted. Joseph is counted twice through his 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. I just wanted to clear that up. Genesis 37, verse 8, his brothers said to him, are you actually going to reign over us? Are you going to rule over us? Remember, Joseph had a dream that they were out in the field, they were farming, and they had collected all these sheaves of wheat, and they put the sheaves together, and Joseph's sheaves stood upright, and all his brothers, the other 11 sheaves, bowed to Joseph. and they are incensed with him after he tells them this dream. How dare you? Who do you think you are, little brother? They hated him even more. Jumping down to verse 26, Joseph has gone out. Jacob sends him out. Go check on your brothers. They're tending my flocks. Go check on him. When they get there, they've decided, let's kill him. Number one, let's kill him. That's their first instinct. We hate him so much, we're going to kill him. Reuben steps into the picture and says, let's not kill him. Let's put him in this hole, this dry well. Reuben's intention was, later on, I'll go get him out of the well. I'll take him back to my dad. I'm going to save my brother. I am my brother's keeper. I'm going to save my brother from my mad 10 other brothers. What's wrong with you people? You want to kill your brother. So they put him in the hole, but later in the day, some Midianites come by. Ishmaelites, these people on camels, they're traders, they're businessmen. And Judah, who's supposed to be the authority in the family, Judah steps up with this idiocy. In verse 26, Judah says to his brothers, what profit is it for us to kill our brother and cover up his blood? We want to kill him and tell a lie to our father, but we're not going to make any money doing that. He's worth something. And you've got Midianite traders passing right by where we are. Let's sell the boy. Unbelievable. Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. As if it's better not to kill him, but to sell him as a slave. That's Judah's great idea, and his brothers listen to him. Yeah, we'll share the profits. We'll cut him 11 ways. Let's see what we can get for the kid. So what did they get but 20 pieces of silver? The story says, verse 28, some Midianite traders passed by. So they pulled him up out of the dry well. They lifted Joseph out of the pit and they sold him to the Ishmaelites, these traders, for 20 shekels of silver, a few ounces, 7 or 8 ounces of silver. Thus they brought Joseph into Egypt. Now, God wanted Joseph in Egypt, and God allowed Joseph's brothers, his hateful brothers, to sell him into slavery. And he said, well, how can you say that so boldly? Because Joseph says it himself. My question is, how did Joseph, the great one, who we're about to see his adultery problem, or his potential adultery problem, we're going to see how Joseph deals with it. How did Joseph interpret this event of his brothers hating him so much that they, number one, plotted to kill him, and then afterwards sold him into slavery? What was Joseph's opinion of this? You have to go to the end of the story, some years later, and when Joseph looks back on this day, this is what he says. Jacob has come down to Egypt. Jacob lives in Egypt for 17 years. The whole family, the 12 tribes, live in Egypt for 17 years before Jacob dies. And Jacob's other sons have this to say. It says, when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, the protector, they said, what if Joseph bears a grudge against us and pays us back in full for all the wrong which we did to him? Joseph is second in command in Pharaoh's court. He could have these boys flogged, put in prison, killed. He could do anything he wants. He's number 2 in the land. And they know it. And they're afraid of their brother. Genesis 50 verse 18, his brothers also came and they fell down before him. What does that remind you of? The dreams. We were out putting wheat in sheaves, and my sheaves stood upright and erect, and your sheaves bowed down before me. His brothers say, are you really going to reign over us? Why, yes, I am. That was a prophetic dream given to me by God himself. Yes, I am going to rule over you, and today's the day. His brothers came and they fell down before him, and they said, behold, we are your servants. My, how times have changed. And Joseph said to them, this is the great answer to the question, how did Joseph interpret what God allowed him to go through? While Solomon is living in the palace at this age that Joseph is at, while he's living in the palace in the golden age of Israel with his father, King David, administering justice and righteousness in the land, Solomon has everything you could dream of at his age. Joseph is sold by his hateful brothers into slavery. But what's his opinion of that event? Joseph said to his brothers, "Do not be afraid. I know what you're thinking, but you don't have to be afraid because I am not God." Am I in God's place to do this to you? He said, "As for you, I know your hearts. I've known you all my life. You meant evil against me. You wanted me dead, and you ended up selling me. You meant it for evil, but you don't have to be afraid because I understand God's plan. I understood the 2 dreams He gave me. And I knew that God would keep the promises of the dreams. God meant this for good. All of this in order to bring about this present result to preserve many people alive." So what was Joseph's opinion of the whole event? Later in his life, we get to pick his brain. He says, "I knew all along, as evil as it was, that one day, because God had shown me in 2 dreams that my brothers would bow down to me, that somehow, some way, God would take me, this peasant shepherd boy, and He would make me into something, somewhere, and my brothers would bow down before me." God meant it all for good. He allowed all these things to happen. While Solomon is living a life of luxury and getting ready to live a life of disobedience to God, here you have Joseph learning through hardship, trial, tribulation, pressure, learning how to be a godly man and to understand God's plan. As dark as things seemed, he understood God's plan. That one day his dreams would come true and his brothers would stand before. Verse 29, let's keep going. They have to hatch the lie. They've sold him into slavery. The Midianites are gone. Now Reuben, the oldest, returns to the pit. He's the one that wanted to save Joseph and take him back to his father, but he says, or he can see that Joseph was not in the pit. So Reuben tore his garments. He was horrified by this. Where is he? Have you done it? Did you kill him? He returned to his brothers and he said, "The boy's not there. As for me, what am I to do? I am the oldest in the family. I'm the protector of my brothers. How am I going to go back to Jacob without his favorite son? What have you done to me?" And here's the lie. They took Joseph's tunic, his multicolored robe that his father had made, and they slaughtered a male goat because they needed blood. And they dipped the tunic in the blood. So that's their plan. Not only do they have a murderer's heart, not only are they greedy of heart, but they're also liars, manipulators, deceivers. And who are we talking about here? The very family of our Savior Jesus of Nazareth. That's who we're talking about. You think you live in a dysfunctional family? You think you could tell stories about your Uncle Pete? Uncle whoever he is? Jesus had this background, and what did he, who was he? Don't ever let your background hold you, limit you to what you can do. Joseph came from a crazy dysfunctional place, and the Lord was with him everywhere he went. They sent the varicolored tunic, they brought it to their father, and they lied directly to their father's face about his favorite son. "We found this." No, you didn't. I mean, the lies just one after another. "We found this. Please examine it to see whether it's your son's tunic or not." You know it's my son's tunic. You took it off his body. The lies, the deception, the manipulation. It's horrible. Jacob examined it and he said, "It's my son's tunic. A wild beast has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Can you imagine the heart, what would be the word? Just sorrow. Can you imagine lying to your father or your mother about your sibling having died that really didn't die? Could you look in your dad's face and hear this and not break down and say, I've got to tell you the truth, it didn't happen the way you think it did? These are the tribes of Israel. These are the men who would make up the 12 tribes of Israel. This is their story. Jesus' extended family. So in his horror, he recognizes the tunic. He says, a wild beast has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces. The thing that's interesting to me is that Jacob apparently didn't understand his boys well enough, didn't understand the hatred that his boys had for Joseph, didn't ever give it a thought. Did you guys do something sinister to Joseph? What did you do to my son? What's this about? Seemingly never questioned them. I don't know how a father lives in a house with so much hatred and doesn't see that these boys could be up to no good. But the scripture doesn't record any thought like that. He immediately goes into the thought that, well, if his brothers brought the tunic back and it's full of blood, Joseph must have been torn up by animals. I don't know what to make of that. It's very interesting. Jacob tore his clothes, put sackcloth on his loins, and he mourned for his son for many days, while his other sons, let him do it. Let the time go by. Then all his sons and his daughters arose to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And Joseph said, surely I will go down to Sheol. I will die mourning for my son. Nothing can ever make this better. So his father wept for him, and nobody did anything about it, none of the other sons. Unbelievable story. And then in verse 36, what is God's move in all of this? Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, Pharaoh's officer, the captain of the bodyguard. Joseph gets to Egypt, where he will soon, after a few years, become second in command of Pharaoh. And through a 7-year famine in Egypt, Joseph will save not only Egypt, but the land of Canaan and the Jews also. Joseph does this. He never would have been able to do it if God wouldn't have put him in Egypt through the hatred of his brothers. God doesn't only use lovely people, He uses people. And He used the hatred of Joseph's 10 brothers to sell him because God wanted Joseph in Egypt to save the Jews ultimately. Verse 39, let's look at the story. I'm in Genesis 39 now. I was in Genesis 37. Genesis chapter 39. Joseph is in Egypt. We just learned that he was sold to a man named Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officers. Genesis 39 verse 1. Joseph had been taken down to Egypt at God's direction as part of God's plan to save Israel. Don't forget to add that into this story because that's exactly what's going on. As part of God's plan to save Israel from a famine that He would bring on the land, God had Joseph taken down to Egypt. And Potiphar, an Egyptian officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the bodyguard, so he's no small officer, he's an elevated officer. He bought Joseph from the Ishmaelites, from the traders who had taken him down there. Verse 2 says, the Lord was with Joseph. Joseph had an intimate walk with God. Even while his brothers are selling him, you don't ever read anything in this story that Joseph is angry with God. Joseph pleads with God, why have you allowed this to happen to me? What you see is God was with Joseph because Joseph wanted to walk with God. It's a beautiful story. What a man. The Lord was with Joseph. So he became a successful man. So he sold him. He allowed him to be sold into slavery. He allowed him to be sold into this particular household. He allowed him to be elevated in this particular household. He became successful in Potiphar's house. He was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. Now his master saw that the Lord was with him. The master, Potiphar, looked at Joseph and said, your God blesses you daily. So it says here, the Lord caused all that Joseph did to prosper in his hands. So Potiphar recognizes, I'm being blessed. My household, my flocks, my holdings, everything I have is being blessed because of you, Joseph, and your relationship to your God. And I see it. Joseph found favor in his sight, in Potiphar's sight, and became his personal servant. And Potiphar made Joseph overseer over his house, and all that he owned he put in Joseph's charge. Joseph is the butler. Joseph is second in command in the home. It came about that from the time he made him overseer in his house and over all that he owned, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house on account of Joseph. What do you call that? Blessing by association. Potiphar is getting the crumbs off the table that God is pouring out onto Joseph's table. A lavish banquet on Joseph's table, as it were, in metaphor. And the crumbs that are falling off the table are still so prosperous that Potiphar is gaining all these things from Joseph being in his house. Potiphar is being blessed by God because of Joseph. Thus the Lord's blessing was upon all that he owned in the house and in the field. Everything he has is increasing. And Potiphar knows it's Joseph and his relationship with his God. That's what's causing this. So Potiphar, verse 6, he left everything he owned in Joseph's charge. And with him there, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. As long as Joseph is around, my household will run properly, wonderfully, seamlessly, like a little sewing machine it'll run. If Joseph's in control, I don't have to worry about anything except what I'm going to eat for dinner. Joseph's got it handled. And his God will see to it that it all works. Joseph was handsome and formed. This is an interesting little fact that's about to be important in the next verse. Joseph is a good-looking little Jewish boy. Probably 17, 18 years old right now. He was handsome in form, strong. He was handsome in form and appearance. And somebody took notice of it. In verse 7 it says, it came about after these events that Potiphar had elevated Joseph to second in command in his household, that his master's wife looked with desire at Joseph. She likes that handsome Jewish boy. She wants that handsome Jewish boy. So Potiphar's wife looked with desire at Joseph, and she, not beating around the bush, very directly tells him, lie with me. A command. I want to sleep with you. I want to have sexual relations with you. I'm commanding you as the mistress of the house. You must do this. It's a command. The seductress, the wayward wife, here she is. Solomon had written in the Proverbs all about the seductress, the wayward wife that would ruin your life. Here it is before Joseph. We're not told what the wife looks like, but does it matter? She's available. In verse 8 it says, but he refused. How did he do that? It was a command from his superior in the home. The mistress of the house says, I command you to lie with me. Why did Joseph refuse Potiphar's wife when Solomon was unable to refuse collecting wives for himself and lying with all of them? What was different about Solomon's upbringing than Joseph's upbringing? What was different about Solomon's life than Joseph's life? What made Solomon's choices uniquely different from the choice Joseph just made? I won't do this. I refuse. He and Solomon are both Jews. They're both Hebrew. They're both male. They both have opportunities to sin against God. Yet one of these men chooses not to sin. The other man chooses to sin. Why is that? Joseph had 2 dreams, another part of the answer. Why is that Joseph said no to Potiphar's wife? He had 2 dreams I mentioned before about his brothers, being above his brothers, being the authority above his brothers, being superior to his brothers in some way, in some time in the future. God not only sent him 1 dream, but 2. In some time in the future, your brothers, even your mother and your father, will bow down to you. And Joseph took God at His word. He was convinced that those prophetic dreams, those dreams and visions that God gave him, that God would send him on a special mission one day. That God had him pre-selected. He was selected for a special mission for God. Otherwise, why the dreams? And he was convinced that God had chosen him for a special mission to save many lives. Here it is right here, to preserve many people alive. Joseph didn't know that yet, but he knew God had something for him. And why would God choose to use him if Joseph would choose to sin with abandon? He didn't want to blow it. He wanted to do right by God. He wanted to live a godly life. He wanted to fulfill whatever plan it is that God had for him that would see him elevated above his brothers. He wanted to see that plan fulfilled. He didn't want to miss that reward. And to fulfill God's plan, you can't sin against the very same God who's going to see that plan happen. Why would you choose to sin against a God who's prophesied you will be elevated above your brothers? Now go on sinning. When I need you, I'll call for you. Just go walk away from me, reject me. Go to any seductress, any woman. Enjoy any pleasure that you might want to enjoy. Go ahead, have fun. And when I need you, Joseph, I'll call you back in. That's not what God does. And He certainly doesn't do it with Joseph. And Joseph knows it. My God is righteous. My God is just. My God is loving kind. My God is compassionate. My God cannot be and will not be duped. I'm not going to play with Him. And I know that this is wrong, and I'm not going to do it. So Potiphar's wife looks at the handsome Jewish boy and says, "Lie with me," in command. But he refused, and he said to his master's wife, "Behold, with me here, while I am present in this house, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. He's given everything into my charge. He's put all that he owns in my charge. There is no one greater in this house than I. And he has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then?" Here's Joseph's rationale. Thank you. "How then could I do this great evil and sin against God?" He doesn't say, "I don't want to do it." He doesn't say, "It wouldn't be fun." He doesn't say, "I guess I could get away with it. You're my boss's wife, and you can cover it up." He doesn't rationalize and say, "Well, this sin for the season, we're going to enjoy it." He doesn't do that. Joseph firmly says, "No, this would be a sin against God. And this God has chosen me. He loves me. I want to walk intimately with this God." Where Solomon, on the other hand, 700 times said, "I want to have the fun." Don't forget Solomon's 300 concubines. Here's one woman, a married woman, a forbidden woman, a woman that he knows he can't have. This isn't a marriage opportunity. This is a seductress on the prowl. And he says, "No." Wisdom. See, that's knowing a godly fact and using it in life. What does she do when he says this? He brings up Yahweh. To do this great evil would be to sin against the one true God. My God, Yahweh, didn't stop her at all. Verse 10 says, as she spoke to Joseph day after day, this is a relentless attack. She's after him all the time, daily, trying to get him to loosen his moral standard. Come on, Joe. Daily. He did not listen to her to lie beside her, which continued to be her command. Lie with me, lie with me, lie with me. He did not listen to her to lie beside her or be with her. Here we see more wisdom from Joseph in separating himself with her. If every time I see you, you're coming on and you're trying to pursue me, this relentless pursuit, the best thing for me is I've got to separate from you. How many times have you heard me say an alcoholic can't hang out in a bar? Joseph, let's just face facts, 17-year-old hormonal Jewish boy, knew I can't stay in the presence of this daily temptation. I got to get out of here. I've got to stop seeing this woman. And that's exactly what he does. He did not listen to her to lie beside her or be with her. He separated himself from her. He removed the temptation from himself. Now it happened one day that he went into the house to do his work. He had to do his work. He was in charge of the house. He went in to do his work. None of the men of the household was there inside. He should have done what? He should have turned around and left. But she was there, and she caught him by his garment. And she said again, lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand and fled and went outside. It'd be like one of you grabbing a coattail and me trying to get away and just letting you have the coat and I'm gone. But all of a sudden you've got my coat. It's a valuable piece of evidence. So he left his garment with her and he went outside. He has rejected her yet again. When she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and had fled outside, she called to the men of her household and said to them, what a lying, conniving woman. Listen to what she says. If you won't have me, if you will reject me to my face in my own house, I'll ruin you. Hashtag me too. If you won't have me, if you won't play my seductress game with me, I'll destroy you. And that's what she does. She calls in the men of the household. She said to them, see, Potiphar has brought in a Hebrew to make sport of us. He's not that handsome boy that she wanted all those days, day after day after day. Now what is he? Now he's a no-good Jew. What do you call that? Hatred of a Jew, just because he's a Jew. What do you call that today? You call that anti-Semitism. You want to read it in the Bible? You just did. All of a sudden, he's just not a servant, he's a Jew. She says it again in just a minute. He's brought in a Hebrew to make sport of us. He came into me to lie with me, a bold-faced lie, and I screamed. So now we know she's a wayward wife, a seductress, an anti-Semite, and a liar. When he heard that I raised my voice and screamed, he left his garment beside me and he fled and went outside. Joseph's integrity cost him dearly. Sometimes, friends, the right decision is the most expensive decision for you. Joseph's integrity, his walk with God, cost him dearly. She ruins him for a time. So he left, or so she left his garment beside her until his master came home. So she's told all the men of the household this. Now she's waiting for Potiphar. She spoke to him with these words. Listen to what she tells Potiphar, that Hebrew slave. Anti-Semitism again. Why isn't he just Joseph? Everybody knows who he is, but all of a sudden there has to be a racial slur attached to it. That Jew boy that you brought in here has done this to me in my own house. Do something about it. Conniving. Oh my goodness. The Hebrew slave whom you brought to us, it's your fault. You brought him into our house. Came into me to make sport of me, and I raised my voice and screamed. He left his garment beside him, and he fled outside. All lies. Now when his master Potiphar heard the words of his wife, which she spoke to him, saying, this is what your slave did to me, his anger burned. This integrity, this character quality of Joseph costs him years of his life. It cost him his freedom. It cost him his elevated position in Potiphar's house. Imagine if he would have simply given in to Potiphar's wife and laid with her, however many times he did it, he'd probably be in the clear. He'd probably have more because she would be feeding him money and whatever else he wanted. But his integrity and relationship with God ruled the day he wouldn't do it. And it would cost him dearly. There's a cost. You have to count the cost of Christianity. So now Potiphar's angry with Joseph. Joseph's master took him and put him into the jail. Yesterday I was a free man because of something your wife did, because of a lie that your wife told, because of this straw man crime she's built up that I committed. All of a sudden, my freedoms are stripped and I'm in jail. The place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in the jail. But the Lord was with Joseph. Who put Joseph in jail? It's very interesting to me that Joseph has this woman coming on to him every day. He realizes this temptation is getting really, really hard to deal with. I've got to separate from her. The woman is never going to stop pursuing. And what does God do? Saves Joseph. I'm going to extract you from that home. I'm going to extract you from that seductress, Joseph. I'm going to honor your wishes to not sin against me. And trust me, it's the best thing for you. I'm going to put you in jail. You're safe there. What a thought. What a thought. So he put him in jail. The Lord was with Joseph and extended kindness to him. Anybody want to guess what that Hebrew word kindness is? Loving kindness. Chesed. Loyal covenant love. I made a promise to you, Joseph, through 2 dreams. That your brothers would bow to you. And trust me, son, I'll see it happen. I'll protect you. The Lord was with Joseph, and he extended kindness, loyal covenant love kindness to Joseph. He protected him so that the prophecy of the dreams could come true, and he gave him favor in the sight of the chief jailer. Joseph trusted God to bring about this promise. He trusted that this promise would one day see the light of day. It would come to fruition. That one day somehow Joseph's brothers, whether in Egypt or the land of Canaan, Joseph has no idea. But one day, according to God, what God has told me personally 2 times, my brothers will bow before me and God will exalt me to a position of high honor and authority. And Joseph believed it. He trusted it. And if I have to go to jail, so be it. Interesting, though, as we close, the great Solomon, one more contrast, the great Solomon, who inherited every single thing a man could ever hope to inherit, including the rulership of God's people, Israel, used his free will to fail God in regard to women. A subject he wrote about a lot in the book of Proverbs, Song of Solomon. Joseph, on the other hand, brought up as a lowly shepherd farmer boy, used his free will to stay in the plan of God, by refusing to allow sin to rule him. We have choices in this world, friends. I pray that you all see the benefits of the blessings of the promise. Those who fear God will start acquiring knowledge and use that knowledge to turn it into wisdom, and the fool will reject and despise that knowledge. It's our choice. God tells us so many things, teaches us so much in the book. We can either be a Joseph or we can be a Solomon. God says, you pick. I'm not going to pick for you. I'm going to show you where that road leads. The way of the sinner is hard. And I'm going to show you the blessed road too. And you pick in your life. We get to pick. I pray that we're all making the decisions that will one day get us to the judgment seat of Christ, to hear the words out of our Savior's mouth, who did everything for us. You did well, you good and faithful servant. Our choice. Let's close in prayer.